Hey there, and welcome to Learn WordPress. In this tutorial, you're going to learn about testing your WordPress plugins for PHP version compatibility. You will learn why it's important to test for PHP version compatibility, where to find information about PHP version changes, as well as two methods to use to test your plugins for version compatibility. WordPress is written in PHP, and as such, it needs to be able to run on at least the minimum supported version of PHP that is available to web hosts. While WordPress has a specific minimum requirement for PHP, older PHP versions will eventually reach end of life by the PHP developers and will not receive any security updates in the near future. For example, the current version of PHP required to run WordPress is 7.4, which reached end of life status on the 28th of November 2022. WordPress core itself is considered compatible with PHP 8, and the WordPress core team is working on making WordPress compatible with PHP 8.1 and 8.2. However, they cannot guarantee that all plugins will be compatible with the current or future versions of PHP. As a plugin developer, it's therefore important to have a process in place to test your plugins for PHP version compatibility. In order to know when and how PHP versions are going to change, it's a good idea to refer to the official PHP website at www.php.net. On the supported versions page, you can find information about which versions are currently supported, at what level of support, and which versions are end of life. At the time of this recording, all PHP 7 versions are end of life. PHP 8.0 is supported for security fixes only, and PHP 8.1 and 8.2 are actively supported, meaning bug and security flaws will be fixed. Note that PHP 8.0 will only be supported for security fixes until November 2023, which is around the time PHP 8.4 will be released, and then PHP 8.0 will be considered end of life. In the appendices section of the PHP documentation, you can find the guides on migrating from older PHP versions, which lists all the changes between the old version and the new one. For example, the migrating from PHP 7.4.x to PHP 8.0.x lists all the changes between PHP 7.4 and PHP 8.0. For the purposes of this tutorial, let's imagine you've developed a simple plugin. The plugin registers a shortcode, which fetches a list of posts and displays the post title of each post wherever the shortcode is used. The post fetcher class handles the fetching of the posts. If you add the shortcode on a page and view the page, you can see that it works as expected when running PHP 7.4. There are a few ways to test for PHP version compatibility, which require different combinations of newer PHP versions and/or installation of various tools. For the purposes of this tutorial, we will look at one manual way and one automated tool. The manual method involves you setting up a WordPress environment with the PHP version you want to test for, and then testing your plugin in that environment. Setting up this environment can be done in a few ways, but the most common option would be to use a local development environment that supports changing PHP versions, such as MAMP, Laragon, LocalWP, and DevKinster. For the purposes of this example, we'll test on PHP 8.0. A quick way to check that you're on the right version is to create an info.php file in the root of your WordPress install and use the following code. Then navigate to the info.php file in your browser and you should see the PHP version displayed. Once you have your test environment set up, you need to enable WP debugging. To do this, edit the WP config file and update the line which defines the WP_debug constant, setting it to true. Additionally, add the WP debug display constant and set it to false, and add the WP debug log constant and set it to true. This will make it so that any errors are logged to a debug.log file in the wp-content directory. Then test your plugin by refreshing the page. Notice that the shortcode functionality breaks. If you look at the debug log, you'll see the following error displayed. It tells you to go to line 21 of the plugin file and see what's going on. In this case, it's telling us that the argument passed of the for each call must be of type array and object, but a null has been given. If you go to line 21 of the plugin file, you'll see the following code, and you'll see that it's trying to loop through the this posts property, which is null for some reason. The reason might not be immediately obvious, so you might have to dig into the migrating from PHP 7.4 to PHP 8.0 guide. Under the backward incompatible changes section, you see the following change. Methods with the same name as the class are no longer interpreted as constructors. The __ construct method should be used instead. So in this case, the class constructor method needs to be updated. Once that's fixed, refresh the page again. This time, however, you see a more serious error. Time to check the log. So this time we have a new error, something about an uncaught type error on array key exists. If you look at that line in the plugin, you'll see that it's trying to use the array key exists function on the post variable inside the for each loop. But the variable is an object, not an array. If you look at the backward incompatible changes section of the migration guide and search for array key exists, you'll see the following change. The ability to use array key exists with objects has been removed. IsSet or property exists may be used instead. This means that previously it was possible to use array key exists on an object, but now it's not. So you need to update your code to use property exists instead. Now if you refresh the page, you should see the shortcode is working again. And if you check the debug log, no new errors have been reported. While the manual method works, it's a tedious process, and it would be preferable to automate this process somehow. There are a number of automated or command line tools that you can use to test for PHP compatibility. But one that is quite useful is the PHP Compatibility tool, which is a set of rules for the PHP Code Sniffer tool. What's great about PHP Compatibility is that you don't have to configure a different PHP version to use it. You can use it with your existing PHP version, and it will check your code against the rules for the PHP version that you specify. To install and use PHP Compatibility, you need to install Composer, which is a dependency manager for PHP projects. For Composer to work, you also need the CLI version of PHP installed on your system. Installing Composer is outside of the scope of this lesson, but you'll find instructions on the Composer website for both Mac OS, Linux, and Windows operating systems. You can find different ways to install PHP on your system on the PHP website under the Installation and Configuration section. Once installed, you can check that you have PHP installed correctly by running the following command in your terminal. php-v. Similarly, you can check that you have Composer installed correctly by running the following command in your terminal. Composer-v. Once you have Composer installed, you can initialize the Composer project by running the following command inside the plugin directory. Composer init. This will initialize a new Composer project in your plugins directory. You can accept the defaults for most of the questions, but when it asks you to define your dependencies and your dev dependencies interactively, you should answer no. You can also skip the PSR autoload mapping unless you need it. If you're already using Composer for your plugin, you can probably skip this step. Next, you need to require the PHP Compatibility dependency, which requires PHP Code Sniffer, by running the following command. Composer require --dev php compatibility /php-compatibility, and we will add the develop branch as the version. The reason you're installing the develop branch of PHP compatibility is because at the time of recording this tutorial, that's the latest version of the code. Once version 10 of PHP compatibility is released, you can leave out specifying the develop branch. You can trust the PHP Code Sniffer Composer installer, and that's required those dependencies. Then you need to require the WordPress coding standard rules for PHP Code Sniffer. Composer require --dev WP coding standards WPCS. Once you've set up your dependencies, you'll need to install them by running the following command: composer install. With all this installed, you can now run the PHP Compatibility tool on your plugin file. The recommended way to do this is to run PHP Compatibility against a specific base version of PHP. In this example, you can run it against version 7.4 of PHP and above by setting the test version runtime variable to 7.4-. So we will call the vendor bin phpcs executable and set the runtime test version to 7.4-. Path will be the wp learn PHP 8 file, and the standard will be PHP compatibility. And this is what the output looks like. Notice how the same error is reported as the manual method, but this time it's a lot more specific. It tells us exactly what line the error is on and what the error is. So now we can fix that class constructor error again. However, notice that the second array key exists error is not reported. This is because the PHP Compatibility tool is an open source project that relies on contributions based on the changes in PHP versions. At the time of this tutorial, the array key exists removal has not yet been added. As noted, one of the downsides of using something like PHP Compatibility is that it's not always up to date with the latest changes in PHP versions. Additionally, it requires familiarity with the command line, which not all developers may have. However, it does have some benefits, such as being able to scan your entire codebase without needing to install and configure additional PHP versions, and therefore being able to automate the process. As such, combining something like PHP Compatibility with the manual testing process you've learned today is a good step closer to ensuring your plugin is compatible with current and future versions of PHP. Happy coding!